trying to cool down. It's just not working.
It's
Uh,
a little
but there's there's
distracting.
there's also this one, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's good.
so
It's
I
a
that's
think it's
shame it's so perfectly centered though, right?
yeah, it is.
yeah, if you
I
could
can do
move it.
this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Film at 11. Yeah.
Looks like your hair's on fire, so
At least he has hair to be on fire.
I'm Mr.
Oh, let's see.
Heat
not for long.
Miser.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God, my wife loves that. So
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of Based on a True Story, a Monster House production. My name is Matthew Baxter.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Stolzno.
and I'm Blake Smith.
Welcome to the show. I guess this is the kind of parallel, based on a true story to the live episode that we did on strange festivals. And I think there's a good, strong link there. At first, I couldn't really see it, but certainly now I think there's a strong link. And this was my first time to see the movie as well. So I know I'm a little late to
I
the
envy
party.
you. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, do you?
Well,
I envy myself for seeing it at all.
I'm excited to hear what you guys think about it because it was when the first time I saw it, I was still very much involved in fundamentalist Christianity, and
Oh,
so
interesting.
everything that Sergeant Howie was going through and found shocking, I found shocking. So
Mm.
now I find myself far away from that mindset, but I can still remember what it was like, and so it's really interesting because I have a much more uh, knowledge about the occult and Western esotericism, that sort of stuff, which is all over the
Yeah.
film. And we'll discuss whether or not that's presented accurately. But it's still a favorite film. So
Well, and that's one of the things we have to talk about is you wouldn't think that Wicker Man is based on a true story, and the thing about it is that they start the movie with this thank you.
Hmm.
Do you want to read that, Blake, or should I?
oh, I
Going to
thought maybe we
bring it
could flash
up
it on the
and
screen. Yeah, do you want to flash it on the screen? The producer would like to thank the Lord Summerisle and the people of his island off the west coast of Scotland for this privileged insight into their religious practices and for their generous cooperation in the making of this film.
which is a real setup for the movie to be based on a true story.
It really is. It certainly implies that, although this may be a fictional tale, it's certainly done with the cooperation of the people of this mysterious land.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yes.
it totally reminds me of a lot of those kind of cultural, warnings or cultural messages that they might include a kind of a content note or something like that too,
No
about any
pagans
kind
were
of,
harmed in the filming of
Right.
this.
yeah.
Only
Yeah,
police
it
officers.
reminds
Um,
me of that style of a kind of a warning as well that you might see at the beginning of some shows. So yeah, that was cleverly done. But this was Matt's first time to watch the movie as well. I think he'd seen
mhm.
bits and pieces of it.
Yeah,
So
little bits and pieces, and you, I always had the impression, and we'll have to get into the plot and everything else about it here in just a moment, but I always had the impression that it was going to be more of a supernatural thriller. And there
Yeah.
was
yeah,
not a bit of that in this movie, and that was surprising to
well,
me.
a lot of superstition
Sure,
though.
sure. A lot of
Well, this
superstition, but nothing. Yeah, I mean, you look at a show because it followed along in that idea, like even Rosemary's Baby, where you come into this situation not knowing that everybody you come in contact with is in on it.
Hmm.
yeah.
It's like Rosemary's Baby. Let's scare Jessica to death. The Believers. There's multiple, even like a Paranormal Activity as you go down through the sequels starts to get that way as well. It's a very familiar kind of trope. But in those other movies, there's The Last Exorcism. Even
Right.
they all have a supernatural element that suddenly gets exposed. More at the end. And this one didn't. It kept its feet somewhat rooted in just mundane reality,
Yeah.
but still pretty frightening.
Well, I
It's
want
interesting.
to add. Oh,
Go ahead, sir. Go
we're
ahead.
going to be
Yeah.
stepping over each other's toes throughout this, I'm sure. Well, I think when you were talking about that element of everyone else being in on the joke or in on this plan, I think that you got a sense of that though, and that grew throughout the movie. I mean, we're going to have to go through the plot, but obviously when the cop turns up and you have the locals, and they're kind of smirking and grinning. And when he goes and sees the school teacher later on, I mean, with all the dealings he has with the men in the pub, I mean, they're all seemingly laughing at him as though they're in on some kind of joke that he doesn't know about
Well,
yet.
exactly.
You know,
And so let's talk about this. This is actually one of the three.
Before you do that, I'm sorry. This is really important. If you have ever watched a based on a true story, or you've ever watched any YouTube video about a movie, the odds are there's going to be spoilers. This is no different.
Chock full of spoilers. Yeah.
Yes, and that's what based on a true story is all about. We spoil everything, even
ruin
even
it.
things you love about it. We spoil it. So that's what we do. So I'm sorry, Blake.
This movie is one of three films that form the triumvirate of what they call folk horror. And you've already caught on to the key of folk horror is that the horror comes from the fact that all the danger is from the people. So the three movies are Blood on Satan's Claw, The Witchfinder General, and in this movie, The Wicker Man. Now, since those three movies were sort of declared to be the core, other movies have sort of fallen into this. And most recently, Midsummer is absolutely in this world. And again, I don't want to spoil Midsummer because it's quite new. But the idea here that your peril is not necessarily for something supernatural or something, a monster. It's just that the way people can turn on each other, and the psychological horror and the hint of the supernatural. And all of that comes from a 2003 interview in Fangoria magazine. And that was with director Piers Haggard, who was the director of Blood on Satan's Claw, which is another great movie. Doesn't even remotely pretend to be based on a true story, but it is a very fun horror film. Now, in that one, there is more of a supernatural element, but in the other two, in The Wicker Man and the Witchfinder General, not so much. But anyway, but let's pretend that people want to know about this film. Plot-wise, I mean, we'll scatter our commentary throughout, but let's talk about how the movie opens up, because I love
all about this guy right here. That's
which kind of gives away is a bit of a spoiler as well. I think used in all the advertising.
Well, seeing it on fire certainly is. And on the poster, you're like, what is that? What's going on? Why is that sinister? Yeah.
Don't find out right until the end, but so the opening scene. I mean, it would seem to be so mellow at first. You're seeing the police sergeant, who's flying over these beautiful islands, Scottish islands, in a seaplane, and it just seems at first very calm and almost positive. I think it really kind of disarms you to begin with, and
it feels like it needed the theme from MASH to be playing.
You're getting the idea that he's going somewhere very remote and he's alone in an airplane. I was like, I don't know if that's a real thing police did back then, but the single investigator going out to have a look-see to look for a missing girl.
That always felt like a loophole to me, really, a hole in the plot, rather, the way that he was sent alone, or he went out alone, and they don't really go into that or explain why he didn't have backup and why he wasn't radioing for backup immediately as soon as things started turning weird, which was early on.
If we can remember at the end of this to talk about how the movie was made, I would just point out that what we're seeing is a trimmed down version of the original. There's a lot of missing footage because just as the film was being finished up, the company that was making it got sold. And as we just recently saw with the Batwoman movie, Batwoman or Batgirl? Batgirl. I can never remember. There was a new movie almost finished and they canceled it. It's really not unusual for when new management comes into a movie studio for them to start tinkering around or completely discard the work being done by the previous owners. And so this movie suffered from that, and a big chunk of it is missing because they wanted to trim it down for the American audiences.
That's interesting. I thought it was just to make it mysterious, because I had a lot of questions.
There's missing scenes of how Howie got assigned to the case and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Reinforcing his devout Catholicism. And so that's not there, and we've lost it. And there's an interesting story about what happened to that footage, but we can pick that up at the end. For now, let's get back. As they're flying the airplane over these islands, you get this wonderful folk music, right? And that's it turns out, and I always forget this, this is not just a horror film, it's a musical. It's like a stealth musical. It is probably the only film.
It is, yeah.
A lot of subterfuge with that.
And my goodness, it's a lusty film. I would say,
Which is why I think you like it.
well, it's
You were excited to watch it again.
again, well, I believe that this film manages to do what a lot of trashy horror films don't, which is to make all of the nudity and sex literally integral to the plot.
A lot of
It's
TNA in this, yeah.
yes, but it's all
So you're saying
designed to make you it makes you uncomfortable.
So you're saying it wasn't gratuitous; it was purposeful.
I think it's purposefully designed to make you uncomfortable. Especially the more Judeo-Christian conservative your attitudes watching this film, the more you're going to squirm. It just, and I really,
Well,
when
I
I
didn't
first
even
saw this,
come from that background. I didn't even come from that kind of repressed background, but I was still uncomfortable. It was really kind of just very overt and unnerving. Really, just kind of put you off. What the hell is going on? What's wrong with these people?
yes. You're just, I mean, immediately you feel disoriented, and you kind of empathize with Sergeant Howie, who he's like
which
law,
I wouldn't
he's order.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Because he's hard to empathize with.
Yes, he's a hardcore. Absolutely, he believes what's right is what's right in his mind. Is like, he wants his values, and he's horrified.
Very self-righteous.
Yes, I mean, the moment he arrives to the time he leaves, he's absolutely at odds with everything about this place. I love it. Also, again, I don't want to. There's things I keep thinking about. I don't want to get them out of order. So let's just stay focused.
Well, I mean, we're still only at the point where he's flying into the island.
And like with this missing footage that we'll talk about later, you get this feeling that it's going to be one of several reasons why he shows up alone. And that's that idea that everybody, even the police chief, is a part of this, in these cult-like movies. That's how it goes.
You get really fast, right? I mean, as soon as he lands the plane, everybody, never seen this girl before, don't know who that girl is. Nope, not from around here. We would know. They're all smirking. They're all like, it's not mysterious. Like
they're laughing at him.
And the big message they're all giving him: you have no authority here.
Yes, I love it.
They're really pushing that message. But the thing is you think that the letter that he personally received is one of we need to can you come here and help us make a search party or something. I don't think we got the impression that the letter was this girl was murdered. The letter is this girl is missing. Could you come out here and take a look?
Her.
So it didn't imply that he needed a force to come with him.
Also true.
It just kind of implied, can you come out here, and then if you need help, call for backup. And you wonder, when did the airplane and the radio get disabled? Was it immediately? Because that's my guess.
Yeah, that's what it seems like when you get to the end of the movie. It seems like they had this all, they did. They had this all set up and planned.
Did.
But I just wonder how they picked such a perfect target. And I guess maybe that is explained with the missing footage. But certainly for me, it was like, how did they know he was a virgin? How did they know that he was so pious? How did they know that he was self-righteous and I mean the fool as well, everything that they needed him to be for the end?
That's one of the things I think as we talk through this, they are testing him, and they really want to be sure that what their plan is going to come right. So they're constantly testing to make sure he is the thing they think he is, and boy, does he not let them down. So
what if at any point that had failed, if he'd given into
they would have had to go find somebody else.
Daughter. But at that point, I think that they would have roused sufficient suspicion in him that he would have been bringing back up. So at any point, it could have just gone awry for them.
Yeah, but the thing is I think they could have disposed of him, but then that would have brought more police as well, and so you got to wonder how they tied it all up at the end, with keeping other police officers from snooping around because he disappeared. But I'm sure they had that all tied up and figured out. So again, they were messing with his mind on this girl. Oh, she's turned into a hare. A rabbit, that is, a hare, and she's up in the hills, and just several different things that they were saying, and she's not dead. But that was all after I believe that he found her name in that registry, the school book.
Right. So he's looking for the girl, and he goes. He realizes at the time he's arrived, he's not going to be able to solve this crime in a single day. He's going to have to spend the night. So he goes to the local pub/inn to get a room. And that's, I think, the first big indication besides, I mean, well, he stops at the candy shop, and that's a little weird because he's going to go talk to the mom of Rowan Morrison, the missing 12-year-old girl,
What a strange
who,
store too, with all the cakes shaped like
oh,
little
yeah,
girls and
and
hares,
hares, yeah.
rabbits
Not
again, and
rabbits, hares. Yeah, I mean, which
Hares.
again, if you've read anything about witchcraft lore and witch lore, hares are the traditional animal that witches turn into.
and they
So
do
it,
correct him as well when he says
yeah, they do. They really,
rabbit.
Mrs. Morrison is quick to point out that it's not a rabbit, it's a hare. You know,
Yeah.
she's a
Well, you know, you're making me think too of the time where they pop a toad into the little girl's mouth to get rid of
yes,
her sore throat, and just all the folk magic and the folk medicine that they're practicing as well. But it did seem like a real mishmash of beliefs to me. And I know, Blake, you want to go more into detail
I do. Yeah.
regarding that, but yeah, it just seemed to me like it was all over the place, the folklore,
But
and it's
isn't that
fiction,
what
so it
folklore
doesn't
is?
matter.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it
mean, it
is
is.
pagan, yeah,
Yeah, it's
Christianity,
just like,
yes,
yeah, Christianity borrowed heavily, and
yes.
paganism, I think, borrowed a bit as well. So
Oh,
it
it's yes, it's
comes
kind
around,
of
goes around.
diffusion, and yeah, yeah,
So this
absolutely.
this kind of pops up in Midsummer as well, where we're eventually going to discover that the religion being practiced on this island is the old gods. It's an ancient religion, and I,
Oh,
I'd like to discuss
cults or
that in
sects.
yeah. But what you're seeing is like what I think that in religious studies they call it syncretism, where they've taken all kinds of elements and mishmashed them together.
Like
Uh,
voodoo, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I just love the fact that as he's going along, you're being presented these ideas both visually and through the music and through the dialogue. It's never like anybody sits you down and says, "Let me explain where all this comes from" or anything. It's just he's just
Hmm.
picking it up, and they're assuming you as a moviegoer, especially when going to see a horror film, already know a little bit of this stuff, whether you've read about it or you just watched a lot of scary movies. Uh, but yet it
Well,
also subverts your expectations because it looks like a Hammer film, but it does not play like a Hammer film.
Hmm.
So
well, I want to add too that you have vestiges of Christianity still there. When that scene where he goes to the cemetery, it seems like they have old headstones, tombstones that have just been razed to the ground and damaged. So I think you still have the kind of the signs and the leftover,
right,
various
because it's revealed that it was a traditional sort of Christian Anglican island up
at
until
some
the late
point.
1800s, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Until the Lord Summerall's great grandfather or grandfather came in and with a bunch of hybridization and other plans for the livestock, or not livestock, but for the fruit and
The fruit
vegetation.
and
That would
vegetables,
Yeah, so,
flourish on that island. Yeah.
right, that would flourish. And so the people, like, he got rid of the old church and brought in these old gods and this idea of the old gods. And what this reminded me of, and I think it wouldn't exist without, is the work of Margaret Murray, who in 1921 wrote a book called The Witch Cult in Western Europe. Now, it's not accepted by modern anthropology as being real. It's been pretty thoroughly debunked, yet
Okay.
it has this huge cultural impact because lots of people who are modern pagans believe that what they're practicing is a continuance of an ancient religion that was suppressed by Christians and by Romans when they came through Europe. And so you'll hear people talk about the burning times, which is, I think, sort of a feminist interpretation of the witch times. And you'll hear people talking about this idea that there were these ancient druids who had this religion. And the thing is,
Mm.
we don't actually know that much about what the druids were up to. We don't know what the Celtic religions were. All we have is
Oh,
the
you
sort of
haven't read
remnants.
Caesar?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all propaganda. It's like
Yeah.
we rolled in, and these terrible people were doing these terrible things, but we don't
Yes.
really know much about it. We don't have a lot of archaeological evidence to back that up.
Well, we have
And
everything
Murray's
Merlin told us. We have.
well, what happened was Margaret Murray's ideas got picked up by fantasy writers and horror writers like Machen and H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, and so it led to all this sort of, I think, cultural. Uh, it's like it's just this available cultural idea that there are witch cults out there and that they're ancient and powerful and they've always been there, and
Right.
that other religions are suppressing them, and
Mhm.
that's been pretty thoroughly incorporated into modern paganism. I realize many people in modern paganism understand that Gerald Gardner was sort of making a lot of stuff up, and I'm not here to deconstruct Christianity or Wicca, but I
No,
am
that's
here to say
beyond the
that.
scope of this.
But this movie inaccurately pulls from all that, and I say inaccurately, and I believe that
Just
it's
as
not because.
inaccurately as everybody else, really.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I'm not mad at it. I think it's actually helps the film because all the places where they're talking about pagan stuff and the old gods, they're wildly off from what the real purpose of these things. At
Well,
one point, but yeah, so we'll get into that. But
well,
I
it's
mean, it's
also a
cool.
remote island, so it's the kind of
Yeah,
thing that could
exactly.
happen. That if they're
Yes,
so isolated from society, they've developed their own beliefs and their own
exactly.
interpretations of everything. So it's
Exactly.
possible.
Right. It's not literally accurate, but it's completely plausible that that's the religion these people have come up with. That's
Yes.
exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be textbook accurate. It just has to be true for these people on this island, which I found very
And they all
plausible.
believe too. Yeah, it
Right.
didn't seem like there were any skeptics or anyone questioning it. They were
I
all
don't think
true
skeptics
believers.
would fare well here. I get this sneaky suspicion they might end up being fertilizer. You know.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
skeptics or believers of different kinds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, that's the thing is they really portrayed it as if no one on the island was unhappy.
Yes.
There was lots of joy to go around.
Well, you know, at first I really thought it was kind of like a mafia style thing of the entire island kind of just closing ranks and not wanting to talk to this cop and just that they had indeed murdered this Rowan Morrison and that they were just, it was a big cover up and they just weren't letting him in on what was going on. I think they did a really good job of setting you up to think you knew what was going to
Yep.
happen very early on.
I've got it all figured out. Look, there's a missing photo.
Yeah.
I know what's going
Yes.
on. I'm a detective
Yeah.
too, just like Sergeant
Yeah.
Howie.
Yeah. Then he goes and finds the photograph, and the crops were non-existent that year, and so
Yeah.
put two and two together, and
Well, and
Yep.
I think that ultimately
Came
that's
up with die.
we've revealed the plot, which is this island's been successful for nearly a century, but now for the first time ever, the crops have failed. And now that they've gone back to believing that the old gods are responsible for the success, well, then obviously the old gods have to be satisfied, and the best way to do that is sacrifice.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
they not just any sacrifice. They want
Oh
the
yeah, not
very
just
best.
an animal, not
Not
even
even a little
child,
girl.
as they say
You
later
know,
on.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I love the speech. In fact, I think I've got a clip you can go to audio-wise if you want to, or I can send you the video if you want to include the video. But yeah, the moment where at the end, by that point, the movie's really pretty much wound up when we get the big reveal. And
Oh yeah, it's
they're
still
looking for a
shocking though. It's really just slams
it
you.
totally is. And
Well-
every movie we keep talking about this. I love the movie where the protagonists go to the library to figure out what's going on. And Sergeant Howie goes to the library, and when he does research, he still thinks he's totally got it figured out, and he knows exactly what to do. They're going to do a May Day celebration. It tells him exactly what that's going to look like. He decides to infiltrate the big parade, going as the fool. And again, another one of those misguided pieces of magic. They present a hand of glory. They're going to sneak in. Sergeant Howie goes back to the hotel to rest before the big event, and they bring in a hand of glory to make him go to sleep. But that's not really what a hand of glory is supposed to do. So a hand of glory is
I
supposed
don't
to come
know
off
much
the hand
about
of a.
this. Do tell us.
Well, you're supposed to. The hand of glory is sort of a magical artifact that you're supposed to be able to create from the chopped off limb of a hanged man. So you chop it off, you perform the ceremony, and then basically turn it into a candle. And
Okay.
then, depending on, there's different versions of it, but basically it's either supposed to help you get past people, or make people paralyzed, or give you light. There's depending on which versions you read. It's got
I thought they
different
were going to
powers.
chloroform him at first because
Yeah,
they kind of
it-
came
she-
in and I thought, oh, she's going to throw
Yeah.
something over him and give him a nice sleep.
And I think in a
Burn
big
some
way,
kind
I
of
mean,
incense or something, or
right. Well, what you see when Howie's going through the village, he's looking for Rowan while everybody's getting ready for this event. He's sneaking around or just knocking door to door looking for Rowan.
He's
And at
had
one
it
point, he
at that
goes-
point. Yeah.
He goes into a casket. What is? I'm about to say a casket room. I don't know what that is. He's going into a place where
Yeah,
there is maybe
A
whatever.
funeral parlor.
A funeral parlor. It looks like a barn to me. But he pops open a coffin, and there's a dead guy in there with coins on his eyes, and he's missing a hand.
I thought
And
it
then
was a
later,
woman.
maybe it's a woman, but
Yeah.
it's a corpse. I think we can agree on that.
Yes.
Yes.
It's missing a hand, and that's where I think our hand of glory is supposed to have come from. So,
Okay. I don't think I
but it's
saw the missing
You know, a
hand, but yeah, I saw
13-year-old
the
boy would
pennies
have
on
a
the
different
eyes.
definition for Hand of Glory, but
yeah.
I
You think of the
Well,
hand of
now
glory
we've had
hole,
it
that's very
explained.
different.
Yeah.
yeah, it is. Yeah,
Cut.
yeah. Um, uh,
Yeah.
it is interesting how, you know, they sort of played that together. I mean, that is another one of those things where it should have been something metaphysical or supernatural happening at that point, but it didn't. You know, if you know that Hand of Glory actually worked, he would have been paralyzed. You know, he would not have been able to move, but that wasn't the case. He just knocked it
Right.
over and freaked out, and
Yeah,
the
he
only
freaked
time was
out. It
when,
got him more upset. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And it seemed like there was the only point that it seemed like there could be something supernatural is when the daughter was sort of trying to lure him from the other room. He acted like he was under some sort of spell, and
Male hormones. Yes, it's a real
yeah,
Yeah, he
thing.
was under a
again,
spell, all right.
yeah,
Yes.
that could have easily been male hormones as well.
Yeah.
But that was the only time that they even hinted that maybe there was more at play than
Mm.
Yeah.
just, you know.
Yeah, how did you like the song about the innkeeper's daughter?
Yeah.
That was a
Kind
bawdy
of
bar song.
Yes,
Yeah.
it
kind of
was.
crude, yeah. And then
Yeah, yeah.
the song that she was singing too. So I believe
Oh, her
that
song's called
Rick
How Do.
Eklund's
Yeah, yeah.
she was pregnant at the time when they filmed, so she had body doubles, and she also had someone who sang those songs, so she didn't sing those
Right.
songs.
Right. In fact, they ended up dubbing a lot of her lines as well because to make it match up,
Oh,
which yeah.
Mm.
So there's a
interesting.
lot of folklore around this, like movie folklore. Like allegedly she was dating Rod Stewart, and like allegedly he tried to have the film blocked because he, you know, she's topless in a lot of it, and that's a
Well, when it's
long
not
scene.
even her,
Mhm.
so
Yeah. Well, it's not her, but there's a lot of they hired a local
Were you
adult
saying that's
dancer.
not her, however, or that's not her
Yeah.
butt?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not her. It's not her nethers. They've got a professional you know, stage dancer of the adult variety. They're doing the more
The scenes.
the more obscene parts of her dance, if you want to say that's obscene. So but the songs again, very lusty song. It's been redone by I can't
Yeah, it
remember who.
has. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was reading about
there's
that. It's
several
been
versions of
covered.
it. I love it. It's a great song. There's a lot of songs that I really like. In fact, if the music weren't so good, it would really ruin the film. But it's like even like the first song about corn rigs and barley rigs, it's like I'm not a giant fan of Robert Burns, but it feels so rural
Authentic.
Very
and yeah,
Scottish.
authentic. Yeah, it really does.
It's like you're
And
walking
just through
through
the
the
record,
Renaissance Festival.
yes,
Just like
totally
that, yeah.
believe
All through
exactly.
the
And
moors.
I had to look it up because I'd never bothered. But a corn rig is, or a barley rig, that's actually referring to the drainage ditches that they had in the old stone separated fields.
Oh,
And they
okay.
still
I
do.
didn't know that.
And so basically the poem is about him and a girl going out into the field and hooking up and having a wonderful time. And then he's basically talking about how beautiful the drainage ditches are because he had a lady there. And it's like, wow, I didn't know
I'll
what that was.
have to
Yeah.
go back and have a listen or look up the lyrics or something because
Yeah,
it just seems
it's
like
a rather famous. Yeah, yeah,
it seems like the kind of film where you could watch it a few times, and the more that you watch it, the more you'd pick up on references and
exactly.
just hidden Mickeys and
Well,
things like that.
little things that I never thought about, like the rowboat, the dinghy that goes out to get him from the plane,
Mhm.
has
The
eyes
eye.
painted on the front of it. I mean,
Oh
why?
yes,
I mean,
yeah, they look
it
like an
kind of,
evil eye or something.
yeah, exactly.
And
It
they
kind of
really,
reminds you that, yeah,
yeah, they really
it's
focused
just,
on that and let you not
yeah.
forget it. You know,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
Zoomed
well,
in on it.
there's so,
Mhm.
but there'll be like scenes where something's happening, and suddenly they'll cut to, it'll just pan across, and there's something hanging from a tree or something hanging
Hmm.
from a doorway,
Or
just
an
to remind you that,
umbilical cord, maybe.
or an umbilical cord hanging from a tree. Exactly. The whole town is as pagan can be. I mean, it's not really any particular brand of anything. It's something they've made up because the
isolation.
screenwriter went and did some library work and just
A,
mashed it all together.
a
But
little
that's
bit,
how we
yeah.
actually, yeah, it's like,
That's how
I
religions
Yeah.
love
work.
this movie. I've seen this movie maybe 15 times, something
Well,
like that. It's a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
can we
wow.
put a
Wow.
little
Yeah.
bit of focus on that Christopher Lee?
Yeah. Let's talk about it, because if we had the uncut version, he would be in a lot more of the film. He shot a lot more
Oh,
stuff.
Well, I
but they
did think it
narrowed
was
it down.
strange. Yeah, I did think it was strange the way he really only came into it right at the end, or towards the end anyway,
Yeah.
when he had to give permission for them to exhume the grave of Rowan Morrison. And yeah,
Yes.
I did think, why didn't they bring him in earlier? But I thought he played a loopy Lord really well, and he had the
He
hair
really
for it
does.
too.
He was
It's
charismatic. He
Tall
really
and
I mean, I
was.
love
lanky
him as
and
Dracula, but this and his role as in The Devil Rides Out are two of my favorite Lee roles because he's not a menacing villain. He is a villain here, but in a way, he's almost like a victim himself. He knows intellectually that there's a practical scientific reason why things aren't working right, but he also knows that he loves this beloved religion, and you know he can't go changing things now, or he'll be the one that gets sacrificed. He's in.
And yeah, Matt and I were talking about that I think was really the kind of idea that they were pushing towards the end. That if it didn't happen to the sergeant, then well, it was going to happen to him, or it would happen next year if the crops failed. But I just wanted to add
Yeah,
to
he had a real dog in the fight, to make sure
to protect
police
himself and make
officer,
sure that this worked. And it makes me think too that his beliefs might not have been so honest, and that there's a possibility if something would happen in future. I mean, this is all speculative because they don't go into it at all. But if in future the crops were to fail again, that he would do something to ensure that they didn't, that they had crops to bring them in from somewhere else. It seemed like he had a lot
Buy
of
some fertilizer, something.
money and power. Yeah, but I just wanted to add about Christopher Lee. I read that he said that was his favorite role. And also Edward Woodward, who's the cop, he said that was his favorite role that he'd ever performed in. So
Wow. It's
that's saying
certainly
something.
iconic. Absolutely iconic. Now, I know he also I've forgotten his name. Oh my God. I want to say it's Richelieu.
Billy
That's not right.
Corgan.
No. And his no, it is Duke de Richelieu. I totally was remembering it right. Sorry. He plays Duke de Richelieu in The Devil Rides Out. And that's, again, he's a good guy in that movie. I know he loves that movie, but you're right. He loved this movie so much. He was the one who bought the rights to the book so that it could be made into a film. He also received no pay for making this movie.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was
really
him and
wanted this movie
Anthony
to happen.
Schaefer. I read that they paid about £15,000 for the rights to the movie, but they weren't faithful to the plot in that book. They really went
No.
did
It's
their own
quite different.
research.
I've got Ritual as an audiobook, and I'm about a third through, but it's wildly divergent from this. Yeah,
But
still
inspired
is about.
by
Yeah, exactly. And this is much more somber. There's the book seems a little jokey. It just seems like it's more humorous, and this is not. There is some funny stuff in here, but this is much more. This is much more about being unsettling. It's an unsettling film with a gut punch at the end. So
Yeah. Speaking of which, that Wicker Man, he was quite a construction project.
he was.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing. But to really realize how big it is, you have to see that. Like, okay, we need to back up
Well,
just
see,
a second.
look at the people over here.
Yeah,
See.
exactly.
it gives you some scale. Yeah.
Yeah, they had the Wicker Man, the thing, the construction. They made 3 of them for the film because, like, there has to be more than one because they've got the scene with well. Can we back up just a second and say, before we see the Wicker Man, Sergeant Howie infiltrates the May Day parade. And then as they're proceeding down to the beach, and it's a very cool, a bunch of things happen during the parade. They get down to the beach at one point where they're give libations to the god of the sea by pouring out alcohol. Again, they're doing all these sort of pagan ritual things. And then suddenly they talk about having the sacrifice. And then we actually see Rowan and she's alive, which is a big surprise. And Sergeant Howie's like, okay, this is where I do my hero run. Grab the girl and we get out of here, right?
Yeah.
So as a literature person, English major, I have to say, of course they have to go through a cave because that's not at all symbolic on a film that's entirely about penises up to this point.
Well, Rowan also says something like, oh, I'm scared of these people, save me. So she's playing the role too.
Absolutely. And then so they get through the cave, and then, as often happens in stories, you come out the other side of the cave and something's quite different. In this case, all the people he's running away from are already there, and the Wicker Man is there, and he sees it. And my favorite line happens.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
Well, I want to tell you too. I don't know if you know this, but I read that apparently that was the first time he'd actually seen the Wicker Man.
Yes.
So that was all just new to him, and so his reaction was genuine.
The actor,
He sure felt it. Yeah. It's
Oh
so
yeah,
good. But back to what you were talking about, Matt, the it's big. It's so big that the biggest guy in town grabs Howie and then manhandles him, and then it has like a set of steps going up so he can safely carry the actor Edward Woodward up the stairs and throw him in with the goats and the sheep and the chickens and everything else.
pigs. Yep.
Yeah, so it's spectacular. During the making of this thing, that the people in the actual village who were around, the rumor got out that they were going to actually burn up all that livestock, and so the producers of the film apparently went around, put up signs, and said that's not true. We're only going to burn up the cute and cuddly animals. Which
well, Britt Eklund actually said that some animals did perish in the filming of that. So Andrew Schaefer says that didn't happen, but she says that some animals did die in the course of that filming.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible, but I think we could talk about the Wicker Man too, and just the folklore behind that, or the history.
Exactly.
Well,
behind
I
that.
do want to say, though, that I do believe that those animals died, much like everybody that was involved with this movie. This is a cursed movie. These people are all now pretty much gone.
Yes. Yep.
And I don't think I've seen it this widespread on a lot of the dotes that we do. But this
Well,
is
especially all the
cursed.
old timers in the pub.
Yeah,
Sure,
they're all gone. All gone.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee, gone.
Mysterious. Yeah.
Yeah, mysteriously.
Edward
So yeah, I'm
Woodward's
sure those
gone.
animals
Woodward.
they're all dead.
Yeah.
But
And
no,
I
the
think
thing that
I probably should point out that those roosters, they don't have no, sorry.
even in a film that focuses
Any
so
opportunity.
much. Now, another thing that I was really wrestling with this movie was when when Howie was being thrown into the Wicker Man, they kind of tied the door closed with a shoestring, and I'm thinking he could have kicked his way out of there.
Well, yeah, he was kind of shaking it, and it seemed very wobbly,
very
and
flimsy.
loose.
But the thing is Karen had brought up that could he have escaped? Where could he have gone? He's on an island. His plane's disabled. He's got no communication. Did he just resign himself that there was no escape? And this death may not be as bad as what they might do to him if he did get out. And it does make you wonder why. Where did he think he was going to go with Rowan? And did that just sort of bring to his attention that there's no escaping this? Because he could have just, sat back and kicked that door, and it probably would have.
Then he'd have to leap off the cliff or something, I think, to escape them.
Yeah, and that's not a good way to go either. So, I don't know. What do you think, Blake?
I'd like to believe that we didn't see it, but there was also a peg in the door, because the way they've got the door, he can reach out, but he can't get down to where the rope is. So I don't. Yeah, he may also be resigned to his fate.
Well, he was
he
also.
didn't even attempt.
He
didn't even try to get out.
I think maybe he was resigned because he was praying, and so I think he really thought, oh well, if this is it, then I'm going to heaven, and I'm
dying a virgin.
But then he also put a curse on the island and on the people, which really makes you think, oh, I mean, lots of possibilities again for speculation about what was going to happen the following year to the Lord or to the people. But yeah, I mean, it had a kind of, I was saying to Matt, a kind of Lord of the Flies feel to it as well. Just a group of people who were on this remote island and isolated and separated from other people, and how they were turning on each other, and what could possibly become. I mean, at that point, they were all still very loving towards each other, but what could have happened in future if they had another crop failure?
Oh yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I loved it. The fact that all the young people had names like Willow and Rowan.
Yes.
And then the people
kind of
that he
fertility
looked in the
references.
registry. Yeah, exactly. He's like, well, these people had Christian names. Well, they were older.
Yeah.
That
was a great line. That was really good.
Yeah, they're all named after, all the girls are named after flowers. And you had a lot of themes of fertility running through the movie, like the hares and the woman in the graveyard breastfeeding who had the egg in her hand. That was very surreal. I thought that was.
There were so many things that felt like it was pulled from was it cunning folk magic, and then so much stuff from traditional or like Wicca, Celtic lore. But then the Wicker Man itself, comes from sort of Roman. Again, I would say Roman propaganda.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Well, they were certainly biased.
Yeah, trying to find the references outside of Rome. is kind of difficult. So
Yeah.
it does kind of seem like, and it makes you wonder, did Julius Caesar see this because they were trying to make a statement and they made this Wicker Man and everything to burn it just to
Well, the Wicker
scare
Man
them.
was a early form. It was a weapon of mass destruction, which is
Right.
good for justification of war.
Well,
So,
so like a Trojan,
To
little
this
Trojan
day.
horse type of thing there,
yeah.
Well, but I
the-
do have the quote from Julius Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic War. So he wrote, "Others have figures of vast size, the limbs of which formed of osiers." That's another term for a willow. "They fill with living men, which being set on fire, the men perish, enveloped in the flames." So that's just a terrifying imagery. And apparently, the author of the scriptwriter was influenced by this particular passage, and also
I
a
bet.
picture that I'm hoping, Matt, you can. I don't know if you want to show it up
I'll-
now
I'll-
or show it
I'll
up
bring it.
later. But yeah, an
I'll
image,
show
and
it
I
now
can't
just
remember,
because of
just so we can
the,
reference it. But
yeah.
apparently Andrew Schaefer was very inspired by this picture as well, which is a really terrifying image, because obviously you see the Wicker Man in the movie is faceless, but if you have a look at this image, I think it's 19th century or 18th century,
18th
18th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
18th
Yeah,
century, has a human face,
Yeah.
and is very
And
scary.
it's chock full of people. It's chock full of people.
Full
Mhm.
of people and animals, and all flailing about trying to get out, and people leaving the scene, obviously leaving their loved ones in there and crying. I mean, it's terrifying. And we should talk a little bit in terms of history, that the belief is that the Celts, the Druids, the Gauls, that they practiced this, and that they would use criminals that also put animals into these things. But yeah,
Wild
usually
animals that were dangerous.
yes, yeah, like bears and lions, and that so they were basically, it was their way too of getting rid of undesirable people in society. However, if they didn't have any criminals, they would just use whatever luckless people
Could have just sent
they
them
could
to
find.
Australia
Well,
Or America, yeah,
or America. Yeah, early enough. Yeah.
or not both.
I think one thing is worth mentioning, like we don't know if the Wicker Man was a real thing. We don't have any evidence for it existing other than this, but
No,
we do know that human sacrifice has gone on in pretty
Has
much
happened.
every culture. For example, like
yeah, and that
it's
the
not
Romans weren't terribly
absurd.
nice either with
They
the
were
kinds
not
of execution.
Yeah. Again, it's did they really like the streets with people on crucifixes? I don't know, but we do know that crucifixion was a real thing. I think that's
Yes.
pretty clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
And also,
another thing.
I was going to say, it's just the Romans telling any other culture that they're the bad guys is pretty funny. So
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, exactly what they did, especially what Caesar did. But another thing that really struck me too was in Wicker Man, how they had very healthy livestock that they had thrown in there. And maybe that was because they were hoping for a better harvest the next year. But I just think in terms of resources, it really makes you wonder, would that have happened? And is that the kind of thing that historically would have happened? Would they have gotten rid of livestock? And so it makes more sense that they would have used these wild animals that they're just trying to get rid of anyway to cull, because if they'd used livestock and even just using trees and branches, what an enormous use of resources that they could and should be using for themselves for survival.
that's what makes it sacrifice, though.
A sacrifice for them too, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's
Absolutely.
in fact, it's the idea of using prisoners is a little bit like using a lame goat or a lame sheep. You're supposed to sacrifice the best to get the best results. If you have a
Kind of
god
sympathetic
who
magic
responds
thing
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like your god's not going to get tricked. It's going to know, that this is you've given me the crappy one. Sure, you sacrificed a goat, but it was that goat you didn't like because it was a jerk. So that's
Well, when you talk about kind of wolf folklore and beliefs and things like that, it's that thing that the wolves know to go after the sick ones and everything, and the old ones, because they're the ones lagging behind, and by doing that, they're keeping the rest of the herd healthy, by kind of trimming the fat, as it were. So yeah, it seems like the herds are making sacrifices to the wolves in that sense,
Mm-hmm.
but they're making those kind of sacrifices that are going to make things better in a different way. So
Right.
for people to do this with, criminals and things like that, I'm surprised they didn't have like an age limit that once you reach a certain age, you're going in the cage. Like like Logan's Run or something. Uh,
Mm.
it.
Well, I do.
Go ahead.
I do want to add something too, just about the link between the sacrifice and the May Day celebrations,
Mm.
because it's on the surface, it's like it doesn't seem like there's any real connection there. Because when you think about May Day, well, there is too. When you think about May Day celebrations, they're usually about fertility, and it's that kind of period between spring and between summer. So it's possible that that would be a time when you would have a sacrifice if you were wanting to have a good harvest the following year. But just in doing some reading, I found that early May Day celebrations used to have symbolic sacrifices too. So they weren't actual, but the Celts used to have a ceremony where I think they used ash and on an oat cake or something, and everyone would be given a slice, and there'd be one person who was chosen to be sacrificed, and they would pretend to throw them into the flames. And you do certainly have that kind of imagery used a lot in the folklore of the Celts, fires, bonfires, and that's played through to today with a lot of the festivals that they have in Scotland, where you've even got some art imitating life with a few festivals where they burn a Wicker Man, and it's kind of hard to tell where the folklore begins and ends, because there's just playing
Well,
that out today.
right. And
Well,
I was going to say the Maypole and May Day strong.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been very familiar to people in England already,
Yes.
and
Yes.
maybe less familiar to Americans, but even more
For
more unknown to
Australians.
Americans. Do you have May Day too, or do you have like
No,
Maypole?
no,
Well, the
because
southern
well,
hemisphere doesn't have any of these gods. They can't
There you
exist
go.
in the southern hemisphere
well,
because May is in the wrong time of the year.
I'd certainly heard of May Day and the Maypole and all of those celebrations, but it's a different time of a different season in
You'd be autumn
Australia.
instead of spring,
So
right?
yeah, so
Well,
the
the night
opposite.
before
So
May
That'd be
Day
more like
too, though.
Samhain.
Yeah. So the night before May Day is Walpurgisnacht or Walpurgisnacht. Sometimes I mess that up. I can read it very well though. But that's kind of one of those nights like Halloween or All Saints Day where it's like it's a thinny time, and the barriers are down. And so in Christian culture, it's a night when you would expect evil to be afoot. And here on Summer Isle, it's a time for let's get it on and make some babies and like take advantage of all the magic in the air. So like literally
yeah,
everybody all over town is having sex outside,
right in
and
front of the
that's
cop.
right. And they're trying to tempt the cop with sexuality and the innkeeper's daughter with that incredibly erotic dance and song. And so I think it's not, there's nothing random about this film. Like every single thing that happens, even if it's not historically accurate or culturally accurate, it's done for purpose. Like there's, which is why I think it was Fangoria called it. Was it Fangoria? Somebody called it the Citizen Kane of horror, which is about right. It's a well crafted film. I mean, like it's Cinefantastique. The magazine Cinefantastique called it the Citizen Kane of horror movies. So
I wish we
Yeah,
could have
and-
had that lost footage.
well, there's little hints at it. So the movie got cut, and the missing pieces were supposed to be put into the film vault, where you would have like the outtakes and the gag reels and all this additional footage. So that's where it's supposed to go. There was a mistake though, and they put it into the wrong vault. They put it into the vault with all the stuff that was not important. And so they were doing road work on the M3 highway nearby, and they had an opportunity to go dump all their garbage under the highway and just not have to go to the dump or anything. And so they took all the film out of that vault, including the negatives for this film. And so what we had was like a
wow.
trimmed down version, and that was all we
And
had.
that's it. Yeah.
And to make copies, they had to use that version. Well, it turned out that the longest cut was the one that they originally sent to Roger Corman, who was going to be the original distributor. And they were able to do a reversal and like reproduce and restore the film from his cut. And it's the longest cut we have. We're still missing, some people say 12 to 15 minutes of film And Christopher
Wow.
Lee was very passionate about, because there was apparently a big thing with Lord Summerisle talking to Howie about the significance of apples and how important they were and all this other stuff. There was the scene where Christopher Lee was supposed to take a young lad to the window of Britt Eklund's, the Willow's, the innkeeper's daughter, and
Mm.
hook them up. But basically, you could see that early on in the film, he's guiding everything, like his hands. He's the puppet master. But with that scene missing,
Okay.
we don't see him till like really close to the end of
Until
the
the
film.
end.
I
Yeah.
think that works better myself. I think it makes it more sinister when he finally shows up. But yeah, I mean, so we
I think it
have
could
some
work
ideas.
either way, but that's
Yep,
interesting to have that alternative view.
yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. So, but even the long cut's a tidy, brisk film. And again, great music, very unsettling, not particularly historically accurate, certainly not based on a true story, but a lot of fun. Really love this
Positioned
movie.
as such and
Yeah.
fun.
I don't know if I've ever heard a film critic call some a movie they liked a tidy, brisk film. So that was a very unique. That could be your catchphrase when you like a movie.
I mean, it just moved. There's not a lot of dull spots in the film.
Right, right. Wasn't a slow mover. Yeah.
No, and
it's
yeah,
very
I think
tidy.
I think as we've kind of talked about already, I really just felt very unsettled throughout the movie. Just so watching it the first time, and that feeling just increased, and really, the climax was certainly when he comes through the cave and get to the top, and you realize that yeah, he's the fool guy, and what's about to happen to him, and it just gets worse and worse from there. It's really shocking film.
You remember?
I was gonna say it's a horror. It really it's one of the few films I've seen that truly evokes horror. Like it's a horrifying
Rather than
moment.
being horror. Yes.
Yeah, and there's
Right, yeah.
there's no
Definitely.
slasher aspect to it. There's
Right.
no
No.
like I said, the supernatural. So it's really unique in that way. But does it sort of make you feel like, when you do this research and you find out about all the things Julius Caesar said and how it really did feel like it was political propaganda?
Yeah, those savage
yeah,
Gauls.
yeah, terrible, terrible people. That it kind of makes you feel like, because like Wicca didn't really get, I guess, birthed until about what the 1960s.
Well, it was,
and paganism
Gardner
is
did
older.
his work in the 1954, 1955 is when Gardner publishes Witchcraft Today, which is sort of the initial Bible for
Right,
Wicca.
right, and it starts, exploding
But you're right, it
more
takes off
into
with the
60s.
hippies. and the-
Yeah, like
yeah.
the gentleman that we talked about with the Blair Witch Project, with that documentary. He was perfect in that,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that whole, this is what Wicca is, and he was
Oh,
the
yes,
poster
yeah.
child. And then,
Blake's
Wicca
favorite,
did
yeah.
sort of come from, paganism. But it all kind of feels like it came from political propaganda by Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder how many of those practitioners realize that and just don't care, because
Well-
a lot of Wicca, a lot of paganism and witchcraft is really quite beautiful.
Yeah. Right. This movie is not about Wicca.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not the
there's
Wicca
no
man.
Wicca in this movie. Yeah,
That's at all.
Just
Right,
Wicker
no,
Man.
it's not Wicca Man. It's
Yeah,
Wicker Man.
Wicker Man. And that sounds like a
I wish-
a spin-off version.
If you like this movie, if you've watched it and enjoy it, and you think this was good,
Leave
it's
a
gut
thumbs
punch,
up and subscribe.
But I wish it had less music and could be a little darker. Check out Midsummer.
Oh,
It's like Wicker Man, only depressing.
Right.
Holy shit.
Oh, I want to add one more thing too. When we were watching this, we kept thinking about Burning Man, and wondering,
yeah.
is there any kind of link
Connection.
between the two? I mean,
There's
there
an
has to
artistic.
be.
There's an artistic connection.
There is, yeah. I found a reference to Larry Harvey, who was kind of the creative director behind Burning Man, and that apparently he was inspired by the Wicker Man, with the effigies that they burn every year at Burning Man, or I don't even know if it's annual. It's maybe not at the moment.
Right.
That he was,
Right.
I think they missed
He-
a year. So.
I'm sure, yep. And that he was also motivated by a fellow San Francisco hippie, Mary Grauberger, who held arts-focused bonfires of her own too. So you've got a festival at Beltane nowadays, an arts and culture festival where, as I was mentioning earlier, they burn effigies. But often too, when they burn fires at Celtic festivals, that would be to ward off disease. So not necessarily for something like sacrificing or killing anyone or anything, but actually to protect themselves. So
Will it
it's
protect
another
you
kind of
against
perspective.
Bitcoin bros? Because I think that's probably a big risk over at Burning Man these days.
For sure, yeah. There's a modern day angle to that.
Yeah.
But I think we've really covered most, just about everything that we can cover
Yeah.
for this. Unless there's
But like,
anything you guys
again,
want to
just
add.
for the record, Wicker Man itself probably not real. The gods
Mm.
they mention aren't correct.
Mhm.
The Hand of Glory, no. The closest thing that I thought maybe might be accurate was there's something to the toad for taking the sort of sympathetic magic. The girl trying to get her. I don't know enough about cunning magic, so
Yeah,
Well,
I think
and
there
something
is. I
practical
think there
because
is folk
toads
medicine
have that
that,
that poison, and that could be also a bit of a analgesic effect.
well, you've also got the term like a frog in your throat or a croak, a
Mhm.
croaky throat. So I think
Right.
that there is some kind of sympathetic magic there. I think something like that was practiced.
Yeah, I mean, and
the
that was the one that,
tadpole, maypole, yeah,
right? Yeah, it all
But
comes together. Um, that didn't come out
Gee.
right. So anyway, the thing is it was an interesting movie. It was a fun movie. I don't know how well it holds up. Um, especially if you're seeing it for the first time and you don't have those sensibilities that Blake, you watched it with.
You need to have some background knowledge, I think. But I think a
Hmm.
lot of people watching this, a lot of our viewers and listeners to the
Monster
podcast,
Talk,
I think
yeah, Monster
they,
Talkers are
they're
going to
gonna
know.
they're gonna have that kind of background and know about a lot of these things. But yeah, that is a good point. I think if you weren't familiar with these kinds of themes, it might be a bit confusing. It'd be confusing for your dad, Matt.
Hmm. Yeah, most things are confusing for him. But if you like this kind of content, you're enjoying these shows, please give us a like, subscribe,
yeah,
and
Leave a comment.
don't forget. I mean, it's really important that I don't say this enough on these shows. Make sure you go to monstertalk.org. Get into the podcast if you are not familiar with it. If you're just coming to this from a YouTube search or something like that, the podcast is so much better because it doesn't involve me. And
But do
you'll
go and
really
check.
enjoy it.
my this area right here is not there either.
But
But no,
do
there's
check out
fantastic guests, fantastic subjects. Go check that out, and then of course,
Well,
Patreon.
Monster Talk Live as well, where we have the kind of companion episode where we talk about strange festivals, because that was really the inspiration for this based on a true story.
Yeah, check
Plus,
out
if
the
you think
playlist
we're
in this
idiots, you can
channel.
tell us immediately live while we're watching it. Right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
That's true.
Abuse
Um,
us in real time.
But then also hop over to patreon.com/monster talk and help us keep this alive because we're all working day jobs. And
Appreciate your support.
yeah, we can do better research
Absolutely.
when we have more time. So
When
anyway,
we can afford to pay for our newspapers.com account.
exactly.
One day.
So with that said, you guys have anything else you want to toss in here before we jump out?
No, I think
Toss
we're
anything
good.
else into the fire? No, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
we're good.
yeah.
Oh, they did do a remake.
Oh, yeah, I can't believe we didn't talk about
I
the
was
remake. Yeah.
hoping we were going to sneak out of this without having
No,
to.
I think
Yeah.
I think we
Talk
just
about
say
it. We need to
just
mention
fade
it. We
out
need
to
to
not the
mention it.
bees, not the bees will be good.
Yeah. Yeah, the 2006 remake with Nicolas Cage. Yeah, it seemed to have more of a kind of satanic slant to it, we thought, from what
Yeah,
we've seen. And
they went with every horror movie trope they could cram in there because they
Yeah.
didn't understand the beauty of the original Wicker Man.
And
So,
none of the folk music. Sorry.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So there's that. And but did you happen to see Nicolas Cage's? I think it was his last movie that he did.
A
and-
bearable weight of something talent. Something.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, have you seen that?
I haven't seen it. William, my son, watched it and said it was great. So
Yeah, Matt's
recommend it.
seen it. And
I recommend
saw it
it.
on the plane home.
He plays himself, and it's not quite
how
being
does
John
one prepare
Malkovich.
oneself for that kind? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite
But
being
what
John
is, yeah.
Malkovich, but it is a
Reminds
very
you of that.
fun. It's a very fun movie, and the Mandalorian's in it, so
Yeah, I like that Mandalorian. So.
mhm. So I do recommend it.
Okay,
Anyway,
well-
enough of that. Um,
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time.
thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.